Question for you guys. How do you go about evaluating an old warband with a new update that makes it play like a completely different warband? Let's find out today. The big April balance patch has gone in for Warcry, and it's had several effects on the game, one of which is to update Nighthaunt. Nighthaunt themselves got, I think it was 6 different profile points adjustments, and then on top of that, their Frightful Touch ability has been amended so that everybody can use it. And this in effect makes Nighthaunt a completely different warband in the way it plays and the way it builds from the way that you did before, and I'm pretty happy. It seems to be testing really, really well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look through Nighthaunt, we're going to do some building with them, we're going to try and evaluate the changes, what might be really good, what might be not so good, and hopefully I'll give a little bit of insight into how I'm building my Nighthaunt lists going forward and the kind of things that I've been testing. Before we get into that, if you want to throw some support my way, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to give just a little bit more support, you can think about joining me here on YouTube. You can join me over on Patreon. You can join me over on Streamlabs. Either way, you're going to get to see videos before they come out, before anybody else. You're going to get to see some behind the scenes content, and you are going to be able to have a little bit of a say into the kind of videos that I make coming up and going forward. But yeah, that's enough of my preamble today. Let's talk about Nighthaunt. I'm really excited, and I think they're going to be pretty good. I want to quickly go back to me and what I said when the points adjustments went in, kind of my big overview of Nighthaunt, the different changes that they got, and the different kinds of opportunities that they might have. So yeah, over to me from my video from the other day. If you've watched that video already, you can go skip forward to the next bit where we're going to get into some analysis and we're going to get into some list building. On to something I am super excited about, a mini rework. 6 units have changed for Nighthaunt, which is very good. They've got points breaks basically across the board. Knight of Frowns and Ethereal Steed is always compared to the 235 point Dreadblade Harrow, because it basically has the same stats apart from a few more wounds. So that's a lot cheaper. 20 points cheaper is a big points break for it. I've been using the Knight of Shrouds and Ethereal Steed quite a bit recently in my test games. I've given it toughness 5, and I'm basically using its double to run into things, kill them, and to get its wounds back to make this big, unkillable, almost-ish roadblock that you can run into swarms of chaff and just hold them up for the whole game. So I'm really happy that we got points break here. The Knight of Shrouds was Games Workshop's big, here is my Nighthaunt general piece model kind of thing. It's way too expensive at 190. They're all paying for that movement 6. Games Workshop seems to know that, so they got a break. Dreadsive Harridans, they got a 5 points break. Harridans were always efficient anyway. Their main problem is that they have strength 3 and counter exists. So that's really what was stopping them being played. I think at 100 points, it makes things a little bit more interesting for them. The 5-3-1-3 damage profile, when combined with the thing that we're going to see in just a minute, I think is pretty good. Similarly, with the Slasher Crone, a 5-3-2-4 damage profile is potentially a lot of damage. She's kind of made a paper, although she's only got 15 wounds, so I think 150 points is fine. A small points break for the Maimon Banshee, already one of the more efficient things in the list. But 3-4-2-4 damage profile, 115 points, kind of brings her more in line with these other kinds of fighters. Your cheapest guy is still your Chain Rasp, and the Chain Rasp is now 70 points. So at least you'll be able to do things with the Chain Rasp. It still has movement 6, it still has flight, and it still has toughness 4. So I think those are things that are going to work for Nighthaunt. Hopefully now you'll be able to build actual decent sized warbands. I think between the Harridans, the Slasher Crones, your Banshees, that'd be pretty good. They already have some pretty decent heroes in the Briar Queen and the Wielder of the Blade. So I think they've got that covered. So we're almost there for Nighthaunt, I feel. I think there are a few more things that they can tweak. But yeah, possibly, I'm going to test them out. We'll see how they go. Especially with this, Frightful Touch. So they've changed it. So they've changed Frightful Touch. They've removed the Destroyer rune mark. Previously, Frightful Touch was only usable by Tomb Banshees, Spirit Hosts, and I forget their names, the guys on the steeds with the scythes. Now anyone can use it, which is real interesting. As a reminder, Frightful Touch basically means all hits become crits. It's on a triple, so that's interesting. But now things like the Dreadsight Harridan can Frightful Touch with its 5 attacks at crit 3. The Slasher Crone can Frightful Touch. The Maimon Banshee can everything can Frightful Touch now on a triple. I think that massively increases the amount of damage, or potential damage anyway, that Nighthaunt can do. But then on top of that, if you have the Destroyer remarks, if you had Frightful Touch before, you get +1 attacks until the end of your activation. So Spirit Hosts go up to 7 attacks, Strength 3, okay, whatever. Every hit counts as a crit. So putting that crit blessing on Spirit Hosts now suddenly makes them a lot better because they get the bonus attack and they get the boost. Similarly, on the Tomb Banshee, the Banshee has 4 attacks and it's got crit 4. It's only Strength 3, but with the boosted Frightful Touch, it goes to 5 attacks at crit 4, which becomes a little bit scary. If you decide to put strength on these guys, that's a very different prospect completely. So I'm happy with this. I think there's a lot that can be done with new Frightful Touch. I'm excited to take a look at it. Again, Slasher Crones, Drossite Harridans. I think that might be a thing. Okay, so first thing that happened, we had some points updates go in. A whole bunch of stuff got a lot cheaper. I mean, a lot cheaper if we're talking about Chain Rasps. I do think that at 70 points, having that toughness 4 and the movement 6, despite the 8 wounds, and the fly remark on top of that, Chain Rasps suddenly become very, very valuable to us. You can do something like bring 4 or 5 Chain Rasp for not all that many points, and still have a lot of points left over for your bigger support pieces, your heroes, and that kind of thing. And that's really one of the hallmarks of the most successful lists that we've seen, especially in the last meta, and I think still going forward into this one, where if you have solid chaff units that you can put into your warbands to fill out that almost minimum size requirement and still leave space for some bigger models, you'll generally be in a good stead. And having the mobility that Nighthaunt do, I think is a very big bonus for those Chain Rasp. I think they're extremely valuable. You'll probably be seeing 4 or maybe even 5 of them in basically every list going forward. I think the biggest winners here were probably the Knight of Shrouds, the Harridans, and the Slasher Crone. I think the Maimon Banshee, it's okay. For 115 points, it's kind of fine. It does have 10 wounds, so it's still a bit on the squishy side for the points cost that you're paying. The 3-4-2-4 damage profile it's very much like a Bestigor. So this thing is effectively, if you think of it as a flying Bestigor, that's exactly what it is. But it's a little bit more expensive than a Bestigor, which is why I don't necessarily think that the Maimon Banshee is going to be your go-to piece going forward. Harridan and Slasher Crown, though, very affordable, still very much on the paper side of things, but they do have a lot of damage. So I think as a meta pick, they'll be pretty good. If you know that you're not going to go into so much toughness 4 fighters where they can just basically counter you down to death, I think they're both very fine picks. The Slasher Crone in particular, considering that you can buff it up to strength 4, it'll be sitting on 165 points, so the same points cost that it used to be before, but with a 5-4-2-4 damage profile. I think that's very valuable. Similarly with the Dread Size, I wouldn't necessarily think about buffing the Dread Thighs with any kind of strength buff, because like the main thing they have going for them is that they are 100 points and they put out a lot of attacks. When you start piling more points onto them without increasing their survivability, I think you might have problems there. Knight of Shrouds and the Knight of Shrouds and Ethereal Steed, massive winners, massive points decreases. I think these guys are going to be some of your go-to heroes going forward, especially the normal Knight of Shrouds, 170 points for a 4-4-2-4 damage profile, fly, movement 6, toughness 4, 20 wounds. That's really, really good. They all have Resurrect because they're Nighthaunt heroes. So yeah, I think these guys are going to be where we're looking, especially if you want something faster, like much, much faster. You can go to Knight of Shrouds with Ethereal Steed. 250 points is not bad at all for its stat line. I really, really like it. Where does this leave Nighthaunt as a whole? We can check out the points updates here. This is all updated. The stuff in like green and yellow are the new updated points. That score that I'm giving is basically the damage efficiency. So now we get to see what exactly are the most efficient things in the list. And you can see it. All the stuff that was buffed are suddenly extremely efficient. The only more efficient things are a Frightful Touch Spirit Host and a +1 attack Ruler of the Blade. So that's really, really good. And if you look at the score itself, my general rule of thumb has always been, okay, if your score is 25 or less, you're in the top third of fighters. So we're not in the top third of fighters in terms of efficiency for the most part, but we are still looking at something like the top 40%, 45% of fighters, which is good. It's a nice place to be in. It means that regardless of what you take here, almost, you can't really go wrong in terms of getting your bang for your buck on the tabletop. All these things at the top here are really where I would be looking at when making my warbands. So I would definitely be looking at Spirit Hosts because you Frightful Touch up a Spirit Host, you see that there, 7.8 damage, almost 8 points of damage on just a normal Spirit Host. We're not even talking about with strength boosts, with crit boosts. So that's fantastic. The Frightful Touch now is giving it +1 attack, which only furthers to increase its damage efficiency, which is great. You probably always want to take the Wielder of the Blade. I was a big proponent of taking the Briar Queen before this, but I think considering that we're going to be focusing more on Frightful Touch and Resurrect, of course, there isn't as much space for the Briar Queen's triple anymore. Don't get me wrong, she's still very, very good as a fighter. I really like her, but I think in terms of what you need out of your warband now, you're probably going to take the Wielder, and you're probably going to take one of those other fast-moving fighters. If you want to take Harridans, the Banshee, Night of Shrouds, all those kind of things, that's fantastic. You generally won't go wrong for the points that you're paying. The other change that was made was to the Destroyer remark, as I've talked about already. The Destroyer remark can now be used by anybody, but specifically things that have the Destroyer remark get to use Frightful Touch and get a bonus attack. So what things have the Destroyer remark? Here's the list. People previously thought, oh, Frightful Touch was just a Spirit Host thing. It wasn't. These 4 fighters could use it, and I think now there are some interesting things in here. So you've got the Hellwraith and the Hexwraith, the Tomb Banshee, and the Spirit Host. Spirit Host, we talked about already, really, really good. Gets a lot of use out of Frightful Touch because it's got those 6 attacks. Tomb Banshee, 4 attacks, crit 4, not bad. Hellwraith, 4 attacks, crit 3, okay. 2-inch range though and 10-inch move, that's pretty good for the 160 points. The star of the show for me really is the Hellwraith. So, what are the candidates? Good candidates for the new Frightful Touch. So, to go over what Frightful Touch does, it basically makes it so that every single hit turns into a crit. And if you have the Destroyer remark, so those 4 fighters that we've already talked about, it'll give you +1 attack on top of that. And it's for the entire round. So if you start in combat, you can use Frightful Touch, make all hits crits, and get the bonus attacks. So what do we want? To get the most use out of it, I think you're going to want either, or any combination of, high attacks, high crit damage, and ideally high enough strength so that those hits are sticking. If you can make it so you win on 4s or you win on 3s, then you got good stuff going on. I think that building your entire game plan around Frightful Touch is probably a mistake. So I don't think you want to be building with 5 or 6 different Frightful Touch targets, because they generally tend to be on the more expensive side, and that kind of neutralizes all of the bonuses that you got from those cheaper chain rasps. So I would be looking at probably 1 or 2 main Frightful Touch targets. So let's say a Spirit Host or a Hexwraith or whatever. And then the rest of your warband, yes, they can use it, but it's not really necessary for them to do what they need to do. And I've got a list of stuff here using Frightful Touch and the kind of damage numbers that they can put out. At the top, the most efficient thing that we have, the Blade Geist Revenants. They will do an average of 6 wounds. Dreadside Harridans, as we've seen. Maimon Banshees, because they've got the 2-4 damage profile, that's pretty good. Slasher Crown, very good also. Normal Night of Shrouds, Spirit Host, Tomb Banshees. They have the Destroyer remark, so they go up to 5 attacks at crit 4, which is pretty nice. Karen Wraith. And then down here are my favorite things. I said it was my favorite thing already, so it's the Hellwraith, okay? Hellwraith, on average, is doing 7.5 damage with Frightful Touch. So you think that's nothing super amazing. Generally, it will be winning mostly on 5s. But once you take Divine Blessings into account, the trick is that you want to hit that 13.3 average damage, so the wound on 3s or wound on 4s damage profile, as reliably as possible. Because then suddenly what it's able to do is run in and then get a bunch of damage onto a thing. It's still toughness 4, which is good, and it's got 25 wounds, so it'll be able to survive that counterattack and then do everything all over again on the next turn. The Hellwraith is your cheapest option for this, which is why I really like it, and we're going to talk about that in some list building just in a minute. Things like the Night of Shrouds are also pretty good. They start with strength 4, you can buff that thing up to strength 5, and then reliably get that damage profile off. But I think for the points cost that you're paying, the increase in damage that you might see or the increase in reliability isn't enough for you to take the Night of Shrouds purely as a Frightful Touch option. Some other decent options might be the Wielder of the Blade. So the Wielder of the Blade is sitting with 3 attacks, 3/6 damage profile. If you Frightful Touch that thing, it's 3 attacks, winning on 3s, doing 6/6 damage. Potentially massive. Especially if you can end the turn with your Night of Shrouds in combat with the thing that you want to kill, and then try and get initiative next turn, pop Frightful Touch on the Knight of Shrouds, attack with 6 attacks, wound on 3, 6 damage. It'll knock out most things that you want to knock out. You guys can read this list yourselves. I think this is just the exhaustive list of really good candidates that you might want to consider bringing. That gives you a lot of efficiency for what you are trying to do. A note about Divine Blessings, both increasing the crit rate and the strength net the same amount of average damage on your fighters, which means when you're going into your fights, you have to look at what your opponent is bringing and tailor either crit or strength depending on what they have. For example, if you're playing against Majority Toughness 4, you might want to look at Strength 4 to make sure that you get more attacks hitting. But if you're playing against Majority Toughness 5, you want to be looking at the crit damage because no amount of Strength boost is going to help you there. Nighthaunt do have an ability, which is a Strength boost against single targets, but I don't think that it's worth the dice that you're going to be putting into it, especially when you need to use your dice on Frightful Touch and on Resurrect and on the move from your Wielder of the Blade. So yeah, I don't think there's any much space. Crit damage increases the actual damage you do, but strength is going to increase the chances of you actually landing that damage. One thing I do want to remind you guys is that as for Divine Blessings, strength is more expensive than crits, so you have to build in that contingency into your warbands. Strength is generally 15 points, crit damage is usually 10 points, so build your warbands as if you're going to give strength to your guys, and then at least you have the flexibility, and you just take the points hit at the end of the day, but you won't lose any efficiency when you're actually playing your games. It does get really expensive to load all your guys up with the intention to Frightful Touch, so use it sparingly. Make sure you know which fighters you're going to bring specifically for Frightful Touch. Like I said, 1 to 2 fighters, maybe even 3, and then that's where you're going to be having targeted blessings to really boost your chances. So what have I been testing? Specific fighters, there are 3 things that I've got here. Knight of Shroud and Ethereal Steed, 250 points, averages 5.3 damage. I think it's really good. I think it's good for a different reason, though, than something like the Hellwraith is good. It's got 20 wounds and toughness 4, right? But the Knight of Shroud's double stolen hours allows it to heal for all of the damage that it dealt in that turn. So let's say you run in and you do 10 wounds worth of damage, it will heal 10 wounds. That makes the thing extremely tanky, and it gives it so much longevity. A Knight of Shrouds can run into an entire deployment group, tank all of their attacks, and attack back, and then heal all the way back up. So I like to give my Knight of Shrouds a toughness boost, makes it toughness 5 a lot harder to kill. A general 4-4-2-4 damage profile is good enough to take down most chaff units. So I really like that as an option. Secondly, I've been testing the Tomb Banshee. Very good Frightful Touch target. 4-3-1-4 damage profile. You can give that a point of strength, make it a 4-4-1-4. When it uses Frightful Touch, it goes to a 5-4-4-4, which is kind of crazy. It's only 190 points if you do that, and it's got the ranged attack on top of that. I think it's quite nice. I think the ranged attack profile gives it a lot of versatility. The 2-5 does come into play every now and again. If you really wanted to, and you're playing against Stormcast, you can still boost its strength, but you can boost the strength of the ranged attack instead to make it so that that ranged attack is winning on 4s with a 2-5 damage profile at 10 wounds. So finally, we have the Hellwraith. I've been talking about it for the entire video. It's not the absolute best unit in terms of raw damage, but I think it's got it where it counts. 200 points is not a lot of points for a flying, movement 10, 2-inch range, 25 wound thing, right? If you boost its strength against toughness 4 fighters, it's averaging 10 wounds. And if you boost its crit against toughness 4 fighters, it is averaging 12 wounds. 12 wounds is really important because that is how many wounds a Horns of Hashut Flame Hurler is. If you can reach out and touch a Flame Hurler on turn 1 and knock it out in 1 attack action, which you most definitely can do with the Hellwraith, that's it. Flame Hurler is dead. And then it's got 25 wounds, toughness 4. It can take the return swing, then disengage, run away, do some resurrection tricks, run back in next turn, use some more Frightful Touch, and do the damage. I really, really like the Hellwraith. I think it's fantastic, and I've been testing it a lot, and it's never done badly for me. List building. The list on the left-hand side is with the Hellwraith and the Wielder and the Spirit Hosts is where I am at the moment with my list building. I really like it. I think that a pair of boosted Spirit Hosts with crit or strength is very legitimate considering the amount of damage they can put out. They have 28 wounds, toughness 4, so they're great anchors for your line. And it's not like they can't go anywhere. They still have movement 6 and fly. So they can do whatever you need to do. We've got the Hellwraith to go out there and to do sniping on things like, I know you won't see them much anymore, but things like Aether Cannons, Flame Hurlers, anything in the 8 to 12 rune range, the Hellwraith can go out, it can touch it on turn 1, and it can knock it out. So very, very good for what it's doing. And of course, we have the Wielder of the Blade with bonus attacks. I said already that the Wielder probably now beats out the Briar Queen for me in terms of usage of dice and how you actually go about using the pieces. But the Queen, she's still very legitimate. The Hellwraith, some options here could be a Dreadblade Harrow if you really wanted the teleports. The Dreadblade, it's kind of a good analogy to the Hellwraith. It does have less range than the Hellwraith does. It's only got 1 inch range, but it's got the same wounds, same move. It's a 4-4-2-4 damage profile instead of a 4-3-1-4, so it's better by itself. But with Frightful Touch, the Hellwraith is better because it gets that extra attack. Especially if you bless up the Hellwraith to get a boosted strength, then it's exactly the same as a Dreadblade Harrow when it uses that ability. Dreadblade Harrow is a bit more expensive, so what you'll be doing is you'll be foregoing one of the boosts on your Spirit Hosts. I think they're a sidestep from each other, depending on what you need. If you really value that teleport, then you can go with the Dreadblade Harrow. If you not so much and you want your fast assassin, go with the Hellwraith. I think it's really good. Another nice thing is that the cheapness of Chain Rasps allows you to take some really big allies. Which kind of allies have I been looking at? I think what you want is heavy, hard hitters that don't necessarily need dice to function. So I think stuff like the Vargulf is a very good option. Stuff like the Vargeist, in that anything in that 250 to 300 point big bruiser range, I think will be very useful for you because you don't have to feed it those dice to get some work out of it. Previously, what you had problems with is you could basically not make an 8-man warband without really skimping on the amount of damage you can do. You can do that now. Chain Rasp is so cheap, 70 points. I've got a list here. You can go Wielder of the Blade, 200 points with the Blessing of Attacks. That's good. Night Shroud's an Ethereal Steed. It's expensive. You can give it toughness, you can give it attacks, you can give it whatever you need for your particular game. A single Spirit Host also, but you can just fill out with those Chain Rasps. You can go to 8 fighters. 8 fighters is a good, healthy amount. I think most of the time we're going to be seeing 7 fighter warbands for Nighthaunt. I think the warbands will be looking closer like my first list than second list. I also think that it depends on how many threats, really, that you want to bring with you. If you are looking at 3 threats or 4 threats, if you want to bring in something like a Vargulf, you will have to skimp somewhere else. You'll be looking at a 3-threat list with the Vargulf, your fighter, your hero, and something else. But I really like, for this new format specifically, having 4 fighty pieces that I can just put on the board and know, okay, they can eat through chaff if I need them to, and they can kind of stick around against enemy heroes if I need them to. I really like that, so that's the way I've been playing. Okay, so that's it. That's my initial thoughts on Nighthaunt. That's where I am at the moment with my list building, and through the testing that I've been doing, I've been really, really happy with them, to be honest. So much so that if I hadn't converted an entire Skaven warband, I'd be bringing them to the next event. So yeah, I think they are very much a very changed warband. They play completely differently to the way they used to play. They have a proper niche now in terms of what they do and how they can do it. So I'm really, really happy. And it's kind of amazing what a couple of small targeted points changes along with a change to one ability can really do. I think they could use an updated reaction because their reaction still just isn't all that good. But yeah, overall, they're a very solid warband. I think you can go 3-1 with them at an event, depending on the missions and depending on your opponents, of course. So yeah, much improved. Very, very happy. But that's it from the video today. As always, if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comment section below what you think about the Nighthaunt changes. If you have any interesting Nighthaunt builds that you've been playing around with, please share that. I would love to see those down below. If you've got any interesting Nighthaunt allies that you've been using or anything else in general revolving around this warband, let us know about it. I'd love to have a conversation. But yeah, that's it. That's it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Nighthaunt. This has been Off Meta Musings, and I'll see you next time.